Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Qualifying is over at the Japanese Grand Prix. Max Verstappen on pole by 1/100th of a second over Charles Leclerc. That does not tell the whole story though, arguably lucky to get away with an instance in which Norris certainly believes Verstappen, at least initially, should have had a slam dunk penalty. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. Thank you very much indeed for doing that one. Plenty to discuss as always. This I thought was pretty comedy. First of all, lots of discussion on the driver situation. Riccardo has practically confirmed now he's not going to be driving anywhere next year. No Haas, no Williams. Ricciardo is going to take a year out. Maybe the Mercedes reserve driver. Not really sure what he intends to gain from that. I guess he's trying to get a seat back in 2024. But next season it's not going to happen for him because we know where Gasly's going to go. Alpine confirmed this just a few hours ago now that indeed Gasly to Alpine is a thing. AlphaTauri therefore getting Nick de Vries, which I believe is the smallest in terms of height and stature driver pairing ever in Formula 1 history. Yuki Tsunoda and Nick de Vries for next season. The engineers are certainly going to like that one. And that then leaves Williams and Haas. Mick Schumacher kind of rebounded rather well from his FP1 disaster class yesterday by sticking it at least above Kevin Magnussen in qualifying today. And therefore Haas will make their choice what they do, either Mick Schumacher or Nico Hülkenberg. Apparently though, if they do decide to get rid of Mick Schumacher, Williams will get him. If they can't get Mick Schumacher, they'll get Logan Sargent. So I think that's kind of Williams' priority list as it stands, is if Haas get rid of Schumacher, then he'll go to Williams. So probably Mick does have a drive somewhere next season. That is what we presently believe. So that's all the driver kind of update stuff from around the world. Let's dive into qualifying. Speaking of Haas, of course, Magnussen P18. And, well, Gasly actually out of Q1 here. He was having some issues with his brakes. I think it's kind of a relatively common thing. They can change the brakes over between FP3 and qualifying. FP3 was, of course, back in the dry at rather different conditions that some of these teams are setting up for. We'll talk about Mercedes later on today because they seemingly have gone for practically a wet setup, and we'll be hoping the conditions tomorrow shake things up a bit, as maybe they will. But today quali was in the dry. Gasly was having some brake issues. He goes out first of all. Latifi with his 5-place grid penalty goes from P20 down to P20, and that was Q1. Q2, Ricciardo knocked out by 0.003 seconds back. He got so close to getting through to Q3, but Sebastian Vettel did make it. Thought this is a fantastic story for Vettel, really. Loves it round Suzuka. Said like no other track is built like this. He just loves it in Japan in general. And yeah, he made it through to Q3 again. I believe every single time he's raced in Suzuka in his entire career, he's been into Q3. So that's pretty impressive stuff. And yeah, Riccardo, Bottas, Tsunoda, Zhou and Schumacher round out Q2. And then it finished off with, well, these were the margins here. So Verstappen at 129.3. Leclerc, I mean, look how close this is. This is less than a meter. I think 74 centimeters was the estimated distance here between Verstappen and Leclerc. Sainz was a little bit further back, and then Perez about 4/10 behind in P4. Now, it was kind of a crazy set of laps actually, because Verstappen, when this was his first lap he did, his second lap wasn't as quick. I think he had some sort of issue, or he hit a curb or something and lost something from his car in the second flying lap, so he didn't quite improve. Whereas Leclerc and Sainz did improve on their second lap, but not quite enough. Leclerc was ahead of Verstappen really going into, I mean, he was 2/10 up, I think, of Verstappen's time going into the final sector, but obviously the top speed of Red Bull helps a little bit with that, and also the final chicane, like the Ferrari doesn't seem quite so good going over the curbs there. It's probably not something that will be happening too much in the race because you don't really, well, you're not quite as aggressive with the curbs in the race situation as you can be in quali. But into that final chicane, Verstappen just chucked the car over the first half of the chicane. Leclerc, for whatever reason, the Ferrari doesn't seem so comfortable doing that, so he lost a good 10th or so in that chicane alone compared to Verstappen, and that was pretty much the difference between both Ferraris being P1, P2 and being at P2, P3 as it turned out they will be. The overall placings look like this. Credit where it is due to Alpine, because Alonso was looking quick all weekend in the Alpine, and then cometh the hour, it's actually Esteban Ocon on the news that Gasly will be joining in next season in the Alpine, who sticks at P5 with a fantastic lap, a 130.1. Alonso couldn't quite handle that, a 130.3 for him, but yeah, the Alpine's looking really competitive with the Mercedes, and it goes Ocon, Hamilton, P5, P6, Alonso, Russell, Vettel, Norris, who couldn't improve, and arguably should have been at least P9, potentially mixing it up with Russell for P8, if not for an instant with Max Verstappen, right? Because, well, I'm sure you guys have seen some of this already, but we'll certainly dive into some of the reaction. So anyway, Verstappen was not ready to do his lap. He'd let the two Ferraris go. For some reason, the Red Bull just takes the outlap super slow. Like, doesn't seem to need to warm up the tyres that much, because if they do, maybe they overheat or something. Not really sure, because if you guys have played the F1 game at all, you know that you really need to absolutely crank that outlap to get any temperature. That's what the Ferraris and the Mercedes do, and pretty much every other car does. The Red Bull doesn't really. So Max Verstappen was going kind of slow here through 130R, and Norris thought, you know what, I'll have some of that. I want the clean air. Let me just get past Verstappen here while he's going slowly, get the track position. Now, I guess obviously Verstappen, didn't expect Norris to try and do this and try and get through before the final chicane, and Verstappen was trying to light up his tyres a bit, and basically just spun the rear tyres out, got a bit of an oversteer moment, and then accidentally pulled to the left, and then Norris was forced off the road. Now, I believe Norris thought at the time that this was kind of a deliberate move by Verstappen to the left to try and effectively defend the position and prevent Norris getting through so that Verstappen could have the clean air for the lap and Norris would be stuck behind. In the end, Norris is forced onto the grass, and his tyres after this would have been covered in grass and stuff, and he wouldn't have been able to get quite the lap that he wanted in. So really interesting instant. Of course, this is when Norris comes back onto the track once Verstappen has kind of saved the oversteer moment, and it was kind of a bit of confusion between both drivers because Verstappen was like, why did Norris even try this going into the final chicane at this maximum speed? Should have known slow car, maybe Norris could have been a bit smarter than going for this move, but at the same time Norris was like, what's this guy doing? He's driving erratically, not paying attention to his mirrors, and trying to kind of defend the line from Norris is basically how he described it. And Verstappen was like, what is going on, mate? Unbelievable. Kind of, I don't know, well, when I initially heard this, I thought maybe he was saying, oh, damn, I made a mistake, I'm going to get penalised, or maybe he was just thinking, what is this Norris guy doing, flying in from behind? Even as Norris says here, what does it look like? Of course, he tried to go left and down into me, and that was the initial discussion here from Lando after the session, where he was like, doing what he did is something you can't do. He tried to defend the line, Norris said initially, and I'll just share the clip for you guys.
It was quite clear he tried to do that, yeah. There's no rule on doing what you can do, but doing what he did is something that you cannot do. So people always overtake before the last corner, as much as everyone always agrees to it. Everyone always does it, so it doesn't matter. He probably would have done the same if he was in my situation, but I wouldn't have swerved at him if I was in his situation. So yeah.
If you'd done that, would you expect a penalty?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So Norris says, look, it's quite clear he tried to defend against me. Doing what he did is something that you just don't do. People always overtake on the last corner, right? So there's this kind of like gentleman's agreement that goes around where the drivers, once they get to the last couple of corners, they're not really meant to overtake. Where you are, that's where you stay for your qualifying lap. Whereas obviously here Norris tried to put a bit of a cheeky one and get past Max. Now, as he says, I expected a penalty for sure, right? Craig Slater asked him, would you think a penalty for that? And he said, yeah, for sure, I would expect a penalty for those actions. Now, as it turned out, the stewards view things rather differently here. So as Horner says as well, like there's a bit of an agreement between the drivers to hold position. Lando decided to jump the queue. Max wasn't expecting it. And Verstappen goes on to say, look, I wasn't deliberately trying to push him off. It was more like, just an accidental moment where he ends up going off the road. Now, in fairness, we've seen instances like this in the past a couple of times. And I thought it's an interesting comment really from Verstappen as well, where he says, look, Norris should have just been more respectful, given me the time of day to do my lap, getting to the final corner, and then go behind me, whereas I'm tried to jump the queue and therefore the incident happened. So, Verstappen putting some blame on Norris, of course, putting the blame on Max Verstappen, but the decision comes from the stewards, no penalty, rather a reprimand. So kind of like a more severe warning. Reprimands count for something, but not all that much in the grand scheme of things. So he keeps the pole position, no issues for Red Bull or Max Verstappen. The explanation they give here actually is rather interesting, just because we do have some precedent for this type of stuff. There are, in fairness, other instances. People have been mentioning, of course, Hamilton Sorokin back in, I think, 2018 in Brazil, where, that wasn't even investigated. And, of course, last year, Abu Dhabi 2021, I think it was Mazepin and Hamilton, where kind of different set of circumstances. But you could well argue that if there were no penalties there probably shouldn't be any penalties here. And as the stewards say, the driver was, unfortunate incidents, etc., etc. So they had to go to the stewards explaining their perspective. I think Lando kind of realized, oh, wow, like that wasn't intentional. Verstappen came left. That was more like, he just kind of lost control of the car for a brief moment. And as they say, regarding the penalty, all previous breaches of this nature have resulted in a reprimand, hence a similar penalty is imposed in this case. This to me is good because I think this is generally true that previous incidents have been dealt in a similar way. There is generally no penalty for, specific instances of this nature straight away, and it's good. We want the FIA to be consistent. If the FIA are just going to do whatever they want based on the circumstances, we don't want that, right? We want them to have a rule book and commit to the rule book, and if the kind of precedent says this type of incident is a reprimand, then they should deliver a reprimand, as they have done. So I don't think there can be any real complaints on this, only that from Norris's perspective, if Verstappen was doing that deliberately, then that constitutes a different type of, different type of environment, right? So Verstappen gets the reprimand for it, his first driver's reprimand of the season, but it won't really affect what's going to happen more than likely tomorrow. And Norris reckons at the end of the day, okay, a bit of a scary incident, but they get past it. Norris will start P10. It might have been in a different position had things have gone differently, but of course the race is going to make the big difference tomorrow, especially if the weather gets interesting. I'll talk in a few hours time here on what the weather might potentially be, how it could affect race strategy tomorrow. But of course now Max Verstappen is in prime position to secure the championship tomorrow. If he wins the race and takes fastest lap, he's champion guaranteed. If he wins without the fastest lap, then Charles Leclerc finishing P2 is enough to prolong the championship until the next race in Kota. If he's 7th or below, it goes to the Circuit of the Americas regardless. This is kind of what needs to happen here. Perez, Charles Leclerc need to do various things, but yeah, practically there is a decent chance, of course, Verstappen ends up securing it tomorrow, but it would be kind of interesting if one particular team or another decided to, pit someone for softs at the end of the race, go for the fastest lap to take it off Verstappen, in theory, to at least prolong the championship one race further, even though it's not really going to matter all that much. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are new, take care, and I'll see you next time.